You see that three-pointed star, and you immediately think of precision engineering. You think of luxury, of power. But the real story of Mercedes-Benz, it's not about a machine at all. It's about a human engine, one that was fueled by debt, doubt, and believe it or not, one of the most daring acts of the 19th century.
So let's just dive right in, because that is the real question here, isn't it? How on earth did those three things, a rickety cart, a determined woman, and a local shoemaker, somehow combine to create one of the most iconic brands on the entire planet? Well, the answer is just an incredible story of vision, grit, and some serious ingenuity.
To really get this, you have to picture the world they were living in. I mean, there were no gas stations, no paved roads. The fastest thing around was a train or, a horse. The very idea of a personal vehicle that moved on its own, that was pure science fiction for most people.
And it's into this world that our dreamer steps, Carl Benz, an engineer with an obsession that honestly almost cost him absolutely everything.
Benz's early career was just one roadblock after another. His first company was on the verge of total collapse. We're talking tools being literally seized by bailiffs. The only reason his dream survived was because of his fiancée, Bertha. She took her wedding dowry, the money that was supposed to secure their future as a family, and she invested every last bit of it in his failing business. It was the first, and maybe the most important bet ever placed on Carl Benz.
And what's so incredible here is that Benz wasn't just some guy who invented a better engine. No, he was a systems thinker. He got that you couldn't just drop an engine into a cart and call it a day. You needed a way to ignite the fuel, to regulate the speed, to change gears, to cool the whole thing down. He basically patented the entire ecosystem of the modern car.
But, inventions sitting in a workshop are one thing. Proving they actually work to a skeptical world, that's a whole other ballgame. Carl was a brilliant engineer, but he was a nervous salesman. He was terrified of public failure, and that is when Bertha decided it was time to take matters into our own hands.
And just look at what she was working with. Less than 1 horsepower, a top speed of 10 miles per hour, maybe downhill with a good tailwind. It had 3 wheels and no roof. This thing wasn't really a car, it was a motorized tricycle. And she was about to take it on the world's first ever long-distance road trip.
Get this, she didn't even tell her husband. One morning, she and her 2 teenage sons just pushed the car out of the workshop, got it started, and headed down the road. The journey was an absolute odyssey. They had to stop at pharmacies to buy a petroleum solvent to use as fuel because, gas stations didn't exist. When a fuel line got clogged, she just cleared it with her hat pin. And here's where her genius really shines. When the wooden brakes started to fail, she stopped at a village shoemaker and had him nail leather strips onto them. Right there, in that moment, Bertha Benz literally invented modern brake pads.
So when they finally arrived, they sent a telegram to a completely stunned Carl Benz. The journey made headlines everywhere. It wasn't just a technical demo, it was the world's first viral marketing event. Bertha proved that this horseless carriage wasn't some engineer's toy, it was a real tool for travel. She gave it purpose.
So, what did this crazy, daring drive actually do for the business? Well, it sparked an explosion. It turned a tiny workshop into an absolute industrial giant. Okay, this number 572 probably doesn't sound like much today. But in 1899, that's how many cars Benz and C produced in a single year. For the time, that number was astronomical. And the growth in people tells the exact same story. In the decade right after Bertha's journey, the company went from about 50 employees to over 400. They weren't just a workshop anymore, they were a full-blown factory, the biggest in the world.
And all of that was sparked by one 104-kilometer journey. Bertha's faith, combined with her husband's genius, had put Benz on top of the world. But their biggest rival was just getting started.
So the story doesn't end there. In fact, the most famous part of the name, Mercedes, didn't come from Carl Benz's company at all.
The name Mercedes actually came from their biggest competitor, a company called DMG. See, one of their directors commissioned a new series of race cars, but he had one condition. They had to be named after his 10-year-old daughter, Mercedes. The cars were a huge hit on the racetrack, and that name just stuck.
For years, Benz and DMG were fierce rivals, but the brutal economy in Germany after World War I pretty much forced them to work together. So in 1926, these two giants merged. They formed Daimler-Benz, and they combined Daimler's iconic star with Benz's laurel wreath to create the logo we know today. And for the cars themselves, they chose the most powerful, most popular name on the market, Mercedes-Benz.
And from that historic merger, the company we know today would just keep evolving through a century of massive, massive change.
Now, the road ahead wasn't always smooth. The company went through some huge transformations, like that massive merger with Chrysler, and then the later split. Then, in 2022, the story kind of came full circle. The company renamed itself the Mercedes-Benz Group, putting that iconic brand right back at the very heart of its identity.
So, when you look at the company today, this global symbol of engineering excellence, it's so easy to forget where it all began. Not in some high-tech lab or a fancy boardroom, but in a small workshop with a three-wheeled cart, a brilliant but doubtful inventor, and a wife whose belief was so powerful she literally drove his creation into history.
In the end, that first automotive revolution was powered by a human engine of pure passion and persistence. So, as we're entering this new age of electric and autonomous cars, it makes you wonder, right? What kind of human engine is going to power the next great leap forward?